Hello, everybody. Anthony Metivier here with copies of The Victorious Mind. Don't want to cut off people's heads here, but I welcome you all to our live stream unboxing of these copies of The Victorious Mind. I want to introduce you to Ben here, and William. Ben Fischel, of course, is the guy who started this adventure that led to writing The Victorious Mind. And William did a lot of the, well, all of it really, the photography of the Memory Palace, including this room that we're in right now, which is all included in your care package when you get your copy of The Victorious Mind. And we're live, of course. If you're joining us now, hit the thumbs up. Let us know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And if you're watching the replay, hit the thumbs up and get involved in the discussion below afterwards. If you're new here, get subscribed if you like memory training. And let's say hello to some of the people in the chat. Reclaiming Life is here. Haven't seen you for a long time. Oh, wow. Wonderful to see you. Thank you for being with us. David is here, and Kendall, and Ingrid, and Barden. Let's see, Lieutenant Colonel Raz. I like that name, Raz. All right. Let's see here. Deanna is here. Barden is here. Sean is here in New Jersey. Renee is here. All right. Good to see you, Renee. Always wonderful to see you. And the Sublimation Eater is here. All right. So why don't we... Adolfo is here too. Good to see Adolfo. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And if you're joining us now and haven't said hello yet, please do. Hit that thumbs up. Let us know where you are in the world. And wonderful, wonderful. Now... just so you know, you memory technique enthusiasts, now is the opportunity to just start memorizing, practicing your memory techniques when you see these names going by. Justin is here, Justin Mooney, hey. Don't just look at the name, memorize it, encode it. What would be your magnetic imagery for Justin Mooney? We were just down in a cafe. I met a dog named Daisy, a guy named Dominic, who is the brother of a guy named Clive. Bam, just like that. Train your mind to just start making the associations as soon as you see them, right? Who's in for that? Who would like to make associations that quick? Train your mind to do it. William would. All right. Well, William, why don't you tell your story that you were telling Ben and I from a few years ago?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to cut out the...
Oh, no, you don't have to cut it out. Just make it family-friendly version.
Oh, well, I was just talking about my first experience with mnemonics with Anthony, so... And because I'm naturally terrible at remembering people's names, but I'm learning the techniques. And Anthony first showed me when we were out doing a vlog, and two strangers came along, and we chatted to them for a little while. And then Anthony said at the end, "Do you remember their names?" And I said no, but then he taught me. So is it okay to say their names? I guess.
Yeah, well, they're strangers on the street. I don't think that they're gonna see this.
So one of the guy's name, it was a couple, a boy and a girl. The guy's name was Francois. So Anthony said, just think of a map of France up above his head and a swastika. And to make it interesting, there's a battle going on. There's explosions. So I remember that real easily, Francois. And then the girl's name was Ilyana.
I remember too.
Yeah.
So, should I say the imagery is a bit graphic?
Yeah, well, you can use your discernment whether you want to get whole. Well, let's talk about that actually for a second, because we in the 21st century, is it the 21st century? We're in a moment in history where we have to be so cautious about what we said. It's a paradoxical moment, the moment in history where we can connect around the world as we're doing now. We're supposed to censor ourselves all the time. And it's quite an alarming moment in history. But at the same time, we also have a moment and an opportunity to be sensitive to people and so forth, right? And so it's good that you're putting the brakes on there. Because one of the problems with memory techniques that's really quite interesting and something to think about is that in the beginning you do need, a lot of us do, not all of us, but a lot of us need to use very, very shocking imagery in order to trigger what's going to help us recall. And so William does have shocking imagery, but there are people who just don't want minds filled with shocking imagery. And I get that. And, I open The Victorious Mind, which we'll open here in a minute, with that warning. This book has some shocking stuff in it, but it's part of the opening of learning how to use these techniques. But later you don't have to. And in fact, I've worked on ways over the years that you don't have to at all by tapping into multi-sensory parts of your brain. So, we don't really have to get into the shocking imagery, but understand that if you feel like you're not creative, if you feel like you don't have associations that are working, there are alternatives. There are ways to do it without being shocking to yourself. And less over the years do I do anything even remotely shocking. But I had to start that way. There was no other way that I could experience this without doing that. So it's very important. But the point is...
Well, kind of the point for me was that the more shocking or the more violent the visuals are or shocking, the more you remember them. So...
Yes, and... That is certainly the case for a lot of people in the beginning, is that you want to trigger this. And, Ben, you're into helping people with, impact that would have happened to their mind that was negative in your work with Project Monkey Mind, which, by the way, visit Project Monkey Mind, Ben's site, for sure, and make sure you get subscribed over there. But what do you think about that? The use of imagery that might be uncomfortable on purpose in your mind. Is that something what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want anything that's going to stress you out too much, but the more shocking it is to an extent, the more it's going to stick in your mind. And I think there's a difference between something that's shocking and memorable and something that's shocking and has a kind of a negative association or provides you negative affect. So I think, there's a balance to strike for sure.
Right.
And I sort of imagine the shocking part more in a cartoon animated type way.
Yeah.
So
I think a point too to raise, which I cover in The Victorious Mind, is that there is a healing benefit to confrontation with the things you're afraid of. And I had to learn that. And a lot of the story in here is how that I had to learn it. And it can take work. So as Ben says, you got to strike a balance. You have to know what it is for you. And that's why I wrote this book, is to help others go forward knowing the world is an unstable place. It's going to knock you down. It's going to throw you left, right hooks, and some of them are going to land real hard. But how can you keep moving forward anyway? And I'll never forget Nick Castle, who was on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, talking about how he used these techniques to overcome PTSD. And it's an episode of the podcast to go and listen to if you have had any kind of mental problems, because his story is quite similar to mine. I had not PTSD, but a lot of really bad thoughts. And it turns out one of the best ways, and we know this from harm, OCD, and so forth, to tackle those thoughts is to actually willingly bring them up and confront them. But this is not medical advice, not a doctor. You've got to, do the research yourself. And that's what this book is about, is helping you do the research yourself. So let's check in with our chat. Barden is here. Hello, Barden. Littlebot says hello. Adolfo asks, Maestro, can I buy an autographed copy of The Victorious Mind directly from you? How much to cover costs? Well, Adolfo, let me answer that in our group, because I have to figure out all those calculations. But thank you. I'm humbled that you would like a signed copy, and I always appreciate so much your support of this project. So let's figure that out. It's something that will require some number crunching to be sure, but thank you. And Kai is here. Good to see you again, Kai. What is this? We are going to unbox The Victorious Mind. Oh, sorry, I keep covering Ben's head here. It's not intentional today. And, this is your opportunity. If you have questions about memory techniques, if you have questions about meditation, I've got a very well practiced meditation and mindfulness expert here, Ben from Project Monkey Mind. You're a .com, yeah, if memory serves.
.com, yeah.
ProjectMonkeyMind.com. And William here is also practicing these techniques. So, if you want some different levels of experience, both memory and the memory techniques, let us know in the chat and say hello. Let us know where you are in the world. Sumit is here. Good to see you, Sumit. Justin is here. Can you discuss the difference between mind maps and palaces? Yeah, absolutely. We were just
talking about that.
We were just doing that. Who wants to remind me? Not that I've forgotten, but what were we talking about there with mind maps?
I was just asking about mind maps. Are they a memory technique or are they more of a brainstorming?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there are many things that you can do with mind maps. But Justin, one of the things you want to think about is what is the outcome that you want, right? And if you want to turn a mind map into a memory palace, it can be a memory palace. You just have to build it to be a memory palace. And we have some material on that on my blog. So if you search for memory palace and mind map, you'll see quite a lot of material there. There is a 3-video series here on the YouTube channel that you can check out, and I encourage you to go and look for those things. I'm not going to be able to fish around for links while we're live today, but please look those things up. And those are packaged discussions of it, but at the end of the day, what I would suggest is that you figure out what your goal is and then figure out what you want the mind map to do, and the mind map process can almost certainly do that. Likewise with the memory palace. I'll tell you the number one tip across the board for all people is if you want to use either of those techniques, make sure that you know what you want it to do, then verify that that tool does the thing that you want it to do, and even if it doesn't, explore it, but set the nature of the outcome first, and then prepare the materials that you may need in advance. Like for example, when I mind map, it ain't mind mapping without this, right? Now, yes, you can mind map without those things, but it's not really mind mapping. And there are reasons why. So Tony Buzan talked about the use of colors, and I didn't believe it for a long time. That was foolish because I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but there does seem to be magic that unlocks that doesn't unlock if you don't use multiple colors. And he always said a minimum of 3. And anyway, I talk more about those in a packaged way on the blog and so forth. But understand that preparation is everything. Knowing what your outcome is everything. Verifying that the tool actually does those things is everything. And then practice. And if you want to get into mind mapping, practice for 90 days minimum. You want to get into mind palaces, memory palaces, whatever you want to call them, practice for a 90-day minimum. Stick with one teaching throughout that. Really explore it before you go and get the shiny new teaching syndrome and add a little bit of this and add a little bit of that. Yeah, you can do that too, but you might slow yourself down. You might get in the way of your own progress. But if you follow a program, which is a lot about what the victorious mind is about, you'll be amazed by what happens when you lock down on one thing and you iterate based on that one thing, which is, the whole Gary Weber thing, right? Mm-hmm. Which we'll get into here. So let's see here. Kai says, I'm reading your audiobook. I half-assed doing the pendulum breathing and muscle progressive relaxation thing and then paused it there. Well, I think you have the answer to what might be stopping your progress. Half of anything is that. Half. But, get back to it. Sometimes what you drop on Tuesday has extra force on Thursday. By the way, interrupt me at any time if you guys want to add something.
Sure.
It's your opportunity.
Well, I would just say with the progressive muscle relaxation, a good principle to keep in mind is that you're never fully relaxed. Mm. So you can do it for 10, 15 minutes and think, oh, I've got this, I'm relaxed. But really, these layers of relaxation that you can peel off are kind of infinite. So don't, if you feel tense, don't take it as I didn't do it properly, because it's really like a lifelong practice.
I love that. That's a great thing. Because if you were to take like the Zen Archery metaphor, right? The bow is only a bow if the string is taut, right, on the bow. And you could only fire the arrow if it was a bow. And so if you take that to life, right, the life in a body is only life if the bow is strung, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe that's just stretching these metaphors too large. But I just love that notion. I've never heard that before, that the body is never entirely relaxed. And it makes total sense that you could just continually peel back those layers of the onion. And we know that even dead bodies are not relaxed because you get, rigor mortis and all that sort of stuff for a certain period of time. So is life ever relaxed? It's not life if it's relaxed, I guess. So let's carry on here. Renee says, question, what chant do you recommend as a beginning step in scripture memorization? Well, that's a great thing to consider, for sure. Well, I mean, I started with Ripugita as the first thing, and maybe that's a bit elaborate because it's 32 verses, at least as it's extracted from by Gary Weber in Evolving Beyond Thought. But have you done any memorization yet?
No.
No. Do you have anything
Not extensively.
We were just talking about the Tao, right? So maybe something from the Tao would be great. But in terms of recommendations, I would suggest that you read a lot and find the thing that resonates with you, and then, ask yourself why. Why does it resonate with you? And if you know the Magnetic Memory Method project and the teaching, I always go for 5 levels why. If you're going to sit down and embark on a journey, you might want to have some good reasons why, and then figure it out. So one of the reasons why that I started on the project that led to the Victorious Mind is, well, first of all, my big reason why is I didn't believe what Ben was telling me, right? So I consider myself a true scientist in the sense that if somebody makes a claim, as a skeptic, first of all, I'm not going to dismiss that idea unless that I've done my own due diligence on it, which starts with research. Then when the research is compelling, oh, well, I admit I first initially dismissed this, but hold on a second, this is not something to be written off so quickly. So then I go and say, well, okay, this is an experiment worth reproducing. But why is it an experiment worth reproducing? Well, in the case of Happiness Beyond Thought, Gary Weber is basically saying that thought can be turned off, right? Now, why would that be a useful thing? Well, first of all, if there is stillness, if there is bliss, if there is pleasure, then wouldn't you want to experience it? Wouldn't you want to have that deep rest and so forth? Then the other thing is that there's a memory angle. So part of my reason why is I just love to get better at memory techniques. I love to explore them more. And I also thought, wow, Sanskrit, that's pretty cool. It's one of the oldest languages out there. It's over 3,000 years old. It's also something that I had known about because I studied biblical Hebrew in university. So I dealt with other dead languages because part of my PhD had to do with the classical world. So I was very attracted to that. So there's part of my why, right? Why these ancient languages? And then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you just keep doing that yourself, you mentioned relaxation, you can always peel back the onion. If you can't get 5 reasons why you're going to do something, then move on to the next thing. Don't wait, though. Just keep reading. So it could be Tao Te Ching. It could be something that Gary Weber is offering there. Have you been attracted to any of the stuff in Happiness Beyond Thought to memorize?
I've just been doing the Satma Nama. That's enough for me for the moment. Yeah,
you could start with Satma Nama. How is that going?
It's great. It clears my mind fantastically.
Yeah.
Feels wonderful. And then also, that's for meditation. Then during the day, I do the, what do you call the nostril breathing?
Yeah.
That brings me straight back into clarity in the moment.
It's very powerful, yeah. So for those of you who don't know Satma Nama, it's actually Kirtan Kriya is the name of it.
Yep.
And it's just literally Satma Nama. You can do it with or without the mudras. And I like it with the mudras. I mean, I'll walk around, have my hands behind my back, and just be thinking in my mind, Satma Nama. It's a beautiful alternative to thinking, right? So you're actively engaged in causing your mind to follow a certain thought pattern of echoic, sound, phonic content that has no particular meaning. Now, Satma Nama does have some meaning if you look into the tradition. I don't really particularly care about this meaning in this case. In other cases, I do care about the meaning, but the reason why I don't care about the meaning of Kirtan Kriya is because it's not verifiable. It's not falsifiable. It's not scientific. However, what's so interesting, and this is back to the why question, why I got so interested in Rupugita, is because I could instantly see this is science. This is, and it's not because it says that it's science in the text, right? It actually says at the end of it, Atma Janam Param Shastram, Atma Janam Anupamam. And that literally means self-inquiry is the ultimate science. It is the ultimate sort of way of creating this state of bliss and understanding and knowledge. And it says it's the ultimate practice of yoga. It's the ultimate prerogative. It's the ultimate thing. And this reminds me so much of the science that Nietzsche has in his work of always saying yes to life. Well, how do you say yes to life? Well, he says you have to actually practice the science of joy. You have to practice the science of knowledge that can create joy. And he actually talks about this tradition and the Vedic structures and so forth in Beyond Good and Evil, which is not a very good translation of the German title. But in any case, I found that science in there. And the beauty there of the meaning is that the meaning actually encourages you to think scientifically. Whereas Kirtan Kriya, Satma Nama, nothing particularly scientific about it. Incidentally, if you don't like the syllable Satma Nama, the Chinese version is Ame To Fo, right? Same thing, Ame To Fo. You can do it with a tune, you can do it without a tune. Anyway, I hope this is answering your question, Renee. They're very powerful practices, and there's reasons why they're powerful. And part of it, for me, is just as an alternative to thought. So pick something that you would rather have in your mental content than blah, 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 blah. You know, like, oh, I wish that this was working better. Or, oh, I wish that I had, this when I don't have it. Or, oh, I wish that I hadn't said that 5 minutes ago. Or, oh, like all this junk, crap, garbage, nonsense, da, 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 da. I don't know about you, but I've suffered that for years. Mm-hmm. Satma Nama is a lot more pleasant. And one of the things you'll find, and this is where you want to make your other choices, is that Satma Nama will burn out. Ame Tofo will burn out. You'll actually become good at doing all of these phrases while thinking other thoughts. So I can sit there and recite Sanskrit for a long time and also be thinking thoughts. So how do you deal with it? So this is taught in The Victorious Mind, which we'll hear unbox. You got to add more challenge. You've got to add more challenge. And so one of the ways that I'm doing that, and William, I remember the first time I was working with the Bhagavad Gita, as Gary Weber puts together some phrases in Dancing Beyond Thought. We went to the art gallery, the museum together. And I was already using that museum. Now I chose that museum to create more challenge, right? So that I'm actually more focused on the content, so that other thoughts aren't slipping in. It's something that you have to do, just like an athlete. You got to challenge the muscle. You actually have to tell the muscle that you're going to challenge it, and then challenge it so that the muscle will grow. It's the same thing with your mind. So anyway, there's a lot to this, but what you choose is obviously not something that anybody can actually get at, but there's a range of things to choose. Just test it, inquire into it. Why this? Why not that? But don't do it in a way that stops you from diving into doing something, right? You can just abandon things. One of the greatest tips that is in Happiness Beyond Thought, Gary Weber says, not all boats need to take you to all islands. Not all boats can. But you want to get somewhere, then you got to have a boat to get to that island. So, use that boat. And if that boat ain't getting you to that island, upgrade your boat, get another boat, etc. So I think we all need to do that in our world, in our own way. And, I'm constantly seeking the next thing I want to memorize. And look, it doesn't have to be these things. You could go memorize pi. Some people get great joy out of memorizing pi. I would not, at least not yet. But when the day comes, maybe I will. And then as long as it's joyous, away we go. All right. Shall we get some of these more, some more of our questions here? All right. Kai says he's going to try it when he gets back to it. Excellent. Kishan asks how to focus for a long time. Well, let me ask you, what would you say about how to focus for a long time?
Well, first I would say start small. There's a great book by BJ Fogg called Tiny Habits. I'm sure you've come across BJ Fogg.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just about habit stacking and starting with very, very small habits so that they become natural. I won't explain his process entirely there, but you can search him, BJ Fogg. That's FOGG.
For those of you who have the recordings from Magnetic Memory Live from 2015, Mark Channon is in those recordings. He's a certified teacher of Fogg's teaching, and he teaches that in our training. So if you have access to that, go through it. You'll find it very, very useful. And he actually gives a demonstration with one of our attendees. It's one of the best things that is available there. So yeah, it's good that you mention it, because we have some certified material around that from I believe Mark was the 8th world memory champion. So it's tailored for people who are using memory techniques. I know there's a lot of stuff in the magnetic memory method world that may, just got to dig in. And by the way, for those of you who are in the masterclass, I recently updated it with some very special Easter eggs. So that's to celebrate the release of this book. And I'm a little bit giddy about it because some of the most accomplished and famous even mnemonists, memory champions, have supplied Easter eggs for me to distribute. Like, what's his name? Willy Wonka. Is that his name? Willy Wonka with his magic tickets. Or what was that that book there that came out recently that it'll come to me in a second. But the video game book, Ready Player One.
Oh, yeah.
Ernest Cline, that guy. He had there's a game designer who hides all kinds of Easter eggs in the game. Well, the masterclass has been updated with the help of some of the best and the most accomplished mnemonists, so that just like on Jeopardy, you won't know exactly which square it's in, but so much fun.
So you have to go looking.
You have to go looking because I'm not going to point it out. Maybe old Willy Wonka here has to. If you can tell me the number, the exact number of Easter eggs in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, we will get together for a one-on-one session. The hunt is on. All right, so no cost, free prize. That's the golden ticket. So let me know the number. And we better make it a little bit more challenging than that because there are people with too much time on their hands. So let me know the number. And
Adolfo's just guessing.
5713. I need to know the number, and I need to know the topic of the map and one of the words, including the language and the topic of the words on the map. That should be enough. 7 says Nick, 14 says Kai. Oh, by the way, you also have to be in the masterclass, and you have to watch that particular Easter egg in order to qualify. But Renee, one day it might be 57, but we still need to know the topic of the map and the country and so forth. Anyway, that's one of the most powerful things in there. I can't believe how quickly that special guest helped me memorize so much. All right, so let's get through the chat here, and then we'll open the book. And if you've got questions, pop them in. And Ingrid says, I too am listening to the audiobook, but certainly will get the hard copy. Wonderful, Ingrid, that's great. I used to love reading audiobooks along with the hard copy. So, thank you for everybody who does that. And if you're just joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let us know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing, how things are going for you. Adolfo says, I intellectually understand that meditation will help me get to the next level in my memory training. My issue is that I may last 10 to 20 seconds before my mind begins to jump around. Okay, well, let's talk about that. You got any suggestions in your experience?
Yeah, well, Lilbot's just put in the comments that don't worry about that. Just go back to your breath or your body or a candle. I think people try and look at meditation as accumulating moments of calm. That's really not what you're doing. It's more doing reps. As every time you go back to the breath, you can consider that one rep. So, and obviously, the more proficient you become in meditation, the fewer reps you'll be doing. But in a sense, the worse you're doing in meditation, the better you're doing because you're actually getting more reps in. Yeah.
Showing up it's the Woody Allen thing, right? 80% is showing up.
It's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's hard when you have a thought, an unwelcomed thought, it puts you off track. But if you think about it like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people approach meditation with this idea that they're trying to get calm, and when they finish the meditation session, they look back and they say, well, was that more or less calm than yesterday?
Right.
But I think that's not the metric you should go by. The metric is, was I able to continuously attempt, set an intention to go back, because the intention is a lot more important than the outcome, because it's a lifelong practice. It's how often are you sitting down, and how consistently can you set an intention to go back to the breath, as opposed to how long did I go without having a thought come up.
Yeah, I would add some finesse to this and say the goal, Adolfo, is to improve your memory. So if that's what you're sitting down to do, then don't sit down and meditate. Sit down and memory-tate, or meta-memory, whatever. The thing is, okay, so as I talk about in The Victorious Mind, when I first really got serious about meditation, Alan Watts, sit just to sit, right? And that's it. So that's the sort of reps thing that you're talking about. Doesn't matter what happens. You don't even have a goal. Just the goal is to sit. And in Zen, they often say the starting point is the goal, right? So if you can establish a regular practice of just showing up to sit, that's one thing. But if you want to add in the memory component very specifically, then memorize something and do that. Now, I know you're very accomplished with your memory palaces and memory tools. So it can be that you go and just sit, forget about breathing and all that sort of stuff first, and just wander your memory palaces. Recall what you want to recall in a dedicated position that is meditation, going through the motions of meditation. And then what you might want to do is memorize something. And this is what accelerated my practice, was memorizing something with a meditative goal. So the goal of what Gary Weber is teaching is turning off thoughts, or at least reducing them, right? And I just thought, this is nonsense. You're not going to turn them away, or turn them off, because as long as there's a mind, what else is it going to do? I mean, brains have thoughts. And I didn't really understand at first what it was that Gary Weber was saying, but there's finesse to what he's saying. There's a difference. Thought then now becomes a different proposition. So what we're turning off is not necessarily thought as such or totally, but rather I thought, self-referential, compulsive self-referential thoughts about my present moment, I, me, my past, and my future, right? And then what your goal is to extrovert, as James Schwartz always puts it, extrovert to be more thinking, if you have thoughts, about the world, how you're going to serve the world. And that leads to the concept of karma yoga. And then if you're more thinking about that, then you're automatically going to think less about yourself, which means less suffering. Now, there are texts that you could memorize that would help you in that regard. Or you could choose to memorize a text that will help you stop thinking about yourself so much. So one of them would be Nirvana Shatakam, which is sometimes called Nirvana, or the Atma Shatakam. And it literally is saying in Sanskrit, I am not my eyes. I am not my nose. I'm not my mom. I'm not my dad. I'm not my genitals. Like it literally gets that specific. You're not your genitals. Great. So what are you? Well, what you are is the totality of what's going on right now, right? So it uses a reference to Shiva, and it's all very complicated, and it's unnecessarily complicated if you get into all the stuff. But if you just take it from math, which is basically grade 2 math, and I know you understand math very well, Adolfo, better than I do, that's for sure. But it's just very simple math. If you're going to look at this from a goal perspective of what meditation can be, what it can do for you, memory or a awakening or whatever, if it's memory, then just memorize stuff that's going to improve your memory and sit there and practice that. But if you want a meditative outcome, and why not make it the outcome of reducing thought or stopping thinking, then something that would help you understand the concept of non-duality and experience it, because it's not really something that's hard to understand, but you have to experience it in order to translate conceptual understanding into actual lived understanding, right? Because it's very simple. Advaita Vedanta, which is this practice, just simply means Vedanta, Vedanta. At the end of the Vedantic texts, the Upanishads, the culmination of that knowledge is Advaita, not two, right? That's it. That's all that this is. And then something like the Nirvana Shatakam, which is saying, I'm not my eyes, I'm not my memory. It even says in there, I'm not my memory, right? it's just helping you understand that what you are from a conscious perspective, which is something Sam Harris talks about, Alan Watts talks about, yada, yada, yada. Like it's neuroscientifically and spiritual, worldly, all comes down to the same thing. You are just the witness of a screen that appears in front of you. And there's just that one screen. And you move your head this way and the screen is now that way. You move your head that way and the screen is now that way, right? That's the oneness. And not two means there's no room for anything else except for that. How could you be your memory when the thing that is your memory is appearing in your screen? Sorry, Ben, I keep... But it's just as simple. It's like grade 2 math, right? Just one. But how do you get yourself to experience it? Well, I think, and if you look at Gary's research, if you look at the research of Andrew Newberg, if you look at all kinds of research from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, in flow, all that it leads to is that flow is really just living in the task positive network of your brain. That's the same area in your brain when you're hanging on the side of a mountain and you don't have time to be impeded by thoughts, because if you think and you blink, you will fall to your death. That's being in the now. That's being in the one. So if you want that, build the meditation practice that will get you there. How do we know which meditation practice will get you there? We don't. That's why you explore. That's why you habit stack, as Ben was saying, and you figure it out. You configure it for yourself. If you don't configure it for yourself, it's not going to happen. You have to explore, just as I had to explore, and so forth. So it's a combination of study, implementing what you study, and then practicing progressively over time, and not giving up too soon, not adding too much at a time. Because if you run these tests and you add too many details, you're going to ruin the data. You're going to make it too complicated. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to stop. But you also need to be challenged, right? So I hope that's answering the question that we were on about. Does that sound about right?
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
In relation to that?
Anybody want some water?
I got coffee still. I'm good.
Okay.
That's mostly water.
Good. Coffee is mostly water. Indeed. Okay. Yes. Question.
So my question is: talking about losing focus. I find when I do lose focus, it's never that you just lose focus. It's like your mind goes into the blah blah, right?
Right.
So
sneaks up on you.
Yeah. So I guess my question is: so you've got the blah blah, which is the default mode network.
Yeah.
And then you've got the task positive network, which is you're focused on a task. Is there such a thing as really losing focus, or is it really your mind is in either of these states and it's just about keeping it in the task positive mode? And also, is that what meditation is? Just being task positive?
It's quite a difficult thing to answer. There's like quite a lot of debate about that.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to solve though.
Go on.
Yeah.
Well, you finish your thought.
I would say practically, yeah, it's good to consider that meditation is being in the task positive network.
Because that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing the Satma Nama, it's when when my mind's, when your mind keeps losing focus, I just make it more difficult.
Yeah.
So I start doing it backwards. I start changing fingers randomly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels like I'm just trying to get back to the task positive all the time.
Yeah. I'm going to say yes, consider it that way. Practically, maybe not actually, because you can have self-referential thoughts and be in the default mode network, and you can, or in the task positive network.
Right.
Yeah.
But practically, yeah, consider it that way.
You can be totally in the zone and have self-referential thoughts. There's no doubt about it. So for example, I feel pretty much in the zone right now. And obviously I'm having self-referential thoughts because I have to speak from a perspective, right? But here's what I really like in James Schwartz, even though, I think that there's issues as well. And there always will be issues in everybody's teaching. But he makes it just very, very clear. The human has a brain, or the jiva, as they say in Sanskrit. Jiva means the individual unit, right? That is experiencing consciousness. So as long as the brain is in operation, whatever appears in consciousness is going to leave it, right? So you could have these wonderful experiences of complete bliss and wonderment and so forth, but because it appears in consciousness, it must leave it, right? And the whole notion of being what we are, which is essentially can be described as a state of becoming. We are pure becomingness, right? And it says in the Exodus, in I guess it's in the Tanakh, the Exodus, right? The Old Testament. It says the burning bush, the whole thing with Moses is, I am the great I am. I'm becoming that which I will become, right? And so it's not that there's a fixed state. It's a becomingness. Becoming what? Whatever it will become. And whatever comes into the fire of consciousness is going to get burned up, and then a new thing is going to come, right? Does that sort of make sense? Does that help answer the question a bit? Because you asked, isn't it all consciousness, or isn't it that, you're just bound to be that you're changing from these states, right? And so when you lose focus, who is it that's losing focus? It's just your becomingness. It's your consciousness. It's not that you could say it's a different kind of consciousness. We can get into all kinds of science terminology about what kind of consciousness it might be. We can go default mode network, task positive network. We can come up with 1,000 million networks, right? We can just delude ourselves with endless scientific terms. But if we just want to take it at its most base thing, it's consciousness. It is the state of consciousness that you're in that moment. And to try to hold on to it, to try to think, I am never going to lose this task positive network that I'm in right now, that's to misunderstand the experience you're having. And that's what Schwartz gets at. And I think he does a really good job at it if you read him. And one of the problems is that it's very hard for a lot of people to actually have the time to read thoroughly and like connect the dots and all that sort of stuff. So how do you do that? Read thoroughly and just do it over time. But it's very clear. This is a kind of mathematics of understanding what consciousness is, and then whatever it is you're striving to achieve, you've got it already. You just haven't seen it, right? So when you lose that focus and then you're back off in the monkey mind, actually, that's just that you haven't really lost it. And the way that he puts it is from the perspective of consciousness, the shared experience of consciousness that we all have. The idea that an individual jiva loses it is just the consequence of being a body, or a meat tube, as he calls it, right? It's just what is part of the package. It's what a brain is going to do. And so where some of the spiritual traditions completely misguide people and mislead people is by suggesting that a human is ever going to escape having a brain. That they're going to make this switch, this change that's going to be so permanent that they will never go back, right? Well, Gary Weber tackles this in his books. He tackles it about the topic of anger. And what do you do when gurus, are somehow angry? Right? How do you explain that? Well, it's because they have brains. Like, there's nothing more complicated than that. And so when you read these ancient texts, and even I have to sometimes swallow myself gagging. Do I really want to memorize this line from the Bhagavad Gita that is absolutely incorrect and scientifically unsound? Well, don't have to. There's no meditation police that say, hey, you've got to memorize this line. But at the same time, you can think. These guys didn't have science. So we now have science. We can do the work for the generations to come to say, look, this is what they said. They didn't understand that the brain was there, but they were doing their best. And look, there's some great tools here. Let's work with them. Let's preserve them, but let's also cut out the nonsense. And this is a great debate that's going on right now with people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins versus like Brett Weinstein, and the whole idea about metaphorical truth, right? You guys following the metaphorical truth thing?
It's a default.
No? So,
I'll back one second.
Yeah. So the idea of metaphorical truth, right, is what is it about, what is useful in a fictional source, even though it's a lie, right? Like, it's just a fantasy. And what can we extract from that and still have value from? And I talk about this in The Victorious Mind quite extensively, because it's important to understand the fact that there are actual truths, so to speak. There's useful stuff in fiction, in other words. And when I was a film professor, that's what I talked about all day long, was what is useful about these movies? What are these movies trying to tell us about how to live better lives? Very, very important. So, yeah, metaphorical truth. Anyway, the whole thing, to answer your question about focus being lost, is I think it's a false goal. I think it's a fantasy to think that it's ever going to stop. But I think that you can also work on it, extending the amount of time that you spend in awareness. I think I'm at about 78% a day. I'm just totally switched on to this light bulb feeling.
By the way, I took your recommendation about getting that book, Learning How to Learn.
Right, Barbara Oakley?
Yeah. So I've been reading through that, and that talks about how they talk about the different ways of thinking as the focused mode or the diffuse mode.
Diffuse mode, yeah.
And they're sort of saying that your brain needs to bounce back and forth between them both. So you can't be totally focused the whole time.
Right.
To work properly, it needs to go back and forth.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great thing. So that's there's a book called Learning How to Learn, which is based on the popular course. They made a version for kids. That's Terence Sainowski and Barbara Oakley, Learning How to Learn. I have a copy here somewhere, but I won't fish around for it now.
That's the version I have, and it is really written with kids as the audience. So you have to sort of put up with the talking, the way it's written. But there's really great advice. Yeah,
there's a video review of that book on this channel.
Right. Is there an adult version?
Yeah, it's called Learning How to Learn, the video course. It's on.
Oh, okay.
It used to be on Coursera.
Yeah.
I imagine it's still there.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Check in. Oh. Well, that was Kishan's how to focus for a long time question. So how to focus for a long time is just to practice being focused and have a goal. Focus on what? What is it you want to focus a long time on? And then understand the role of the diffuse mode. You do need time to lose focus. And if you don't, you're not going to percolate stuff. If you look at it neurochemically, look, you've got all these neural networks in your brain. And we don't know everything about it, but there's positive and negative ions that need to flow through the synapses at the end of the neurons. And the speed at which they travel is somewhat regulated by all kinds of things. How tired you are, how well fed you are, how hydrated you are, and how organized you are. What is your environment? Are you hot? Are you cold? Etc. And so the regulation of the flow of those positive and negative ions through the synapses is going to have a lot of things, and your focus is going to have a lot of things that you have to look at to the external world. And then you have your goals, right? What is the mission here? What are the steps of the mission? How organized are you? If you want to focus for a long time, you need to practice all those things. When I write a book this long, there's thought that goes into how am I going to get myself to sit for long enough to write 1,700 words, right? And I have a course called Conquering Content, which goes deep into how that I managed to memorize or write 1,700 words in that short period of time. And there's a science to it. And that's why that there's, nearing 300 articles on the Magnetic Mary Method blog that I've written myself. Most of them. Some of them have guest posts, etc. But there's a science to it. And the focus is because of all these conditions. It's not just focusing for a long time. It's focusing, Kishan, for the right amount of time towards a particular outcome that is well understood. So if you want to get Conquering Content, there's that if you're a writer. But it's also covered from a meditation and memory angle in this book, The Victorious Mind. All right. So, J.A. is here. Good to see you, J.A. Thank you for joining us. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let us know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And what's your guys' time like? I can go on forever, but...
I've got time, yeah.
All good.
You're all good? All right. So we're celebrating the release of The Victorious Mind. Really excited to have you all with us now. Thank you for being here. Let us know in the chat where you're in the world, what you're doing. We're going to unbox the hardback and the paperback. What do you think we should unbox first? Hardcover or softcover?
I ordered myself a hardcover.
Well, thank you for doing that. I really, if you guys want to see all the photographs that we took, make sure that you get the care package that comes with the book. We didn't put every single last photograph in there. That was partly to keep the costs of the book as low as possible, because every photograph we add unfortunately, the printer and the Amazon delivery fees goes up, and it's all complex stuff. But we did our best to put as many of the photographs as possible. But for all the photographs, make sure you download the care package that's linked to inside of the Victorious Mind book. And then I just walk you through the Memory Palace, which is just outside our door here in Kelvin Grove, for one of the pieces that I've memorized. It is, I think, in my experience of looking at mnemonic examples, I think it's one of the longest and most detailed mnemonic examples that there is. I don't know if you guys have seen anything longer. It may be that there's lots longer. I don't know. But the second longest that I've seen is Matteo Ricci in Shiguo Jifa, which is the Chinese title of Western Memory Technique. That's what he called his book in Chinese, about how he learned so much Chinese, and he wrote it in classical Chinese. All right, so we decided on hardcover first?
Well,
I don't
Nick
know.
said hardcover. So.
Oh, Nick said hardcover? All right.
I'll start with the soft build up to that.
I think we got a couple more questions to answer. Nick says,
Oh yeah, he had a good question.
how would you practice memory while cycling? Well, that's a great question. I used to do that all the time, Nick.
See, I cycle a lot, so I'm curious, and I've been wondering about this.
Oh, yeah,
I'd
you
love
are
your
a
advice.
cycler. Well, I mean, just practically, I remember going to meet Nick at, we used probably one time with you as well, at Jenny's meetings.
At ESPA.
Miss you, Jenny. So, I would just cycle, and I'd be going, whatever I was memorizing. Chittameva Mahadosham, Chittameva Hi Balakaha, Chittameva Mahatmayam. I'm riding, paying attention to the world. And then in my mind, I'm here in this apartment or out in the street, right? Pedal, pedal, pedal. Navigate Memory Palace. If you know how to use these techniques, you can use them while you're cycling. You can use them while you're doing the dishes. I do it when I'm taking out the trash. Yes, I do sometimes take out the trash. Such is life. There's no specific tips about that. But how would you practice? This is very simple. I am going to, on this ride, recite this. So let's say you were building a 00 to 99 PAO. Pedal, pedal, pedal. 00, Thomas Zaz. 01, Sad Tragedy Mass. 02, The Sun. 03, Semich. 04, Sart. 05, Sal. Go all the way through. This is a great way to focus on a mental activity. It's like beads. Those people who meditate with beads and they switch from bead to bead to bead? It's like beads in your mind. But you just have to set the parameters of the training mission. So that's how I would suggest you practice while cycling, to both of you. Say, on this ride, I'm going to recite this piece mentally in my mind, or I'm going to practice navigating this memory palace using one of the navigation patterns, or whatever it is that you're going to do, right? Any more?
I would say you can any repetitive mental activity can be done with a repetitive physical activity. So I do quite a lot of mantra meditation while jogging, or self-inquiry while jogging, and they kind of go hand in hand. So.
Right. So when you're jogging, when you say self-inquiry, what is it that you do?
That'll be like looking at the body. When you get into the habit of running kind of unconsciously, you can ask yourself who's running, who's and then who's hearing, who's feeling the pavement against their feet, who sees the sky, all these kinds of things.
And just for people who are new to this, what's the rationale, or what's the notion behind saying who? Like, who is this that's seeing the sky?
Yeah, well, it's a little tricky to explain, but you could say who or what, or any question that suits you. But what you're really trying to do is catch your body in the act of doing something unconscious and realize and see that you're not in control, or at least initially that you're not in control of certain aspects of your experience. So you think, oh well, I'm walking, and then you realize, well, who's been walking for the last 10 minutes? I was thinking about this, and then you dive deeper and deeper, and who's thinking, and where do these thoughts come from? Where do these sensations come from? Right.
So that's interesting, because part of what this practice is called in the ancient world is Atma Vikarya, right? Which is now translated as self-inquiry. But actually, apparently, the better translation is self-remembering, right? Which is very interesting. Now, Atma-Vicharya or Vicharya is different than what is called Loka-Vicharya or Vicharya, right? And Loka is more like inquiry into the external world, what's happening now. And you could also translate Loka-Vicharya as, the world news or something like that. Anything that's external to the self. And Ramana talks about this difference between Atma-Vicharya and Loka-Vicharya. And it's very interesting I think, to see those two distinctions. But to sort of second what Ben is saying, this goes back to the goal of meditation and not having thoughts. And then the nuance there is not having thoughts of what, right? Of self, I thoughts all the time. And if you constantly say, well, who is it that's noticing the sky? Can you find that little person you think you are? Can you really find, whomever it is? And when I was on my bike rides, I would just have this amazing stillness when I would ask these questions, right? Because thoughts would be coming up about, oh, well, this thing is not good or whatever. Well, to whom is it not good, right? Where's this guy? Where is this little blah, 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 this is not good? And it just dissolves, right? Because you can't find the guy. There's no little guy, right? And so that helps you experience that your consciousness is just this wide open space, and anything that appears in it is actually appearing to you, to your witnessing function, so to speak. And that thing, if you really look for it, you'll see that there's something inside of you that doesn't change. I never believed such a thing was possible. I was reading these descriptions, something inside of me that never changes. What could this be? Right? But then I found it one day, and it turns out it was there all along. And that's like the most strange thing about it. And you'll find that you feel a little bit silly. You're like, wow, this was here all along, and I just didn't see it. And then you have the switch. And some people say that if you make the switch, you're never going back, which I think is to your question about like what happens when you lose focus. Yeah. And the reality is if you keep practicing, you can train yourself to get yourself back. And then it becomes more and more, let's say not permanent, but it's a habit. It's a pattern. You like the word pattern a lot, but it's an algorithm. It's a function. So, I've noticed that I play out a lot of patterns that are really just programs from my dad. Like I'll say, this is a behavior that I used to witness from my dad, right? And then using these tools of self-inquiry, just say, who is this that is working out this pattern? It's not me. It's just some program inside of this meat tube. I love that term, meat tube. The meat, because the brain is just meat too, right? So how can we change this? Well, the Sanskrit and Gary Weber's work. Are my thoughts useful? How do they behave? That's another set of self-inquiry questions. Well, these thoughts are not useful, and they behave really stupidly. They are unskillful, right? So then what would be the more skillful thing to do? And then you have a whole new vista that opens up of better thoughts, better behaviors, and it's very, very powerful. It will change your life. You just have to practice it. You have to train yourself to have a better response. And so, any self-inquiry you can get into is very, very powerful, I would suggest. So I hope that helps answer what I would do when I was bicycling and how we got into there. Nick says that he would do his 00 to 9 in Russian. All right, that sounds great. I one of these days I got to get back into Russian. It's a beautiful language. All right, Lourdes is here. Good to see you, Lourdes. Haven't seen you for a while. Adolfo says, I try focusing on a candle, but my mind jumps to the candle in Beauty and the Beast. Then I would go on a 10-minute journey inside the castle. I'll keep at it. Excellent. Well, I would just suggest put some of these self-inquiry questions into the castle. And, who is it that sees the beauty in the Beast? Just play around with it. I think you'll find it's pretty transformative at the end of the day. It's like math with yourself.
One thing you can do is going back to the idea of habit stacking, is you can tie in inquiry to different areas of your life and choose things that you're going to do every day. So you're going to brush your teeth every day. So you're going to eat every day. So inquire every time you brush your teeth, or who's doing this. Every time you're eating, who's doing this. But I think what you said about making the distinction, what was it, loka
vicharya.
That distinction is important, because a lot of people talk about self-inquiry and it gets very confusing, because when you translate it back to English, it just, everything falls under a blanket term, and then people get confused.
Right. Yeah, the whole notion of self here is not you, not yourself. It's rather consciousness, I guess, right? So who knows what it means? I mean, nobody knows. That's the whole thing. That's why you inquire into it, because no little person is ever going to understand the universe, and you're a fool if you think you will. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of fools out there who think that they understand the universe, right? And so this comes back to the Tao Te Ching, which I was starting to memorize yesterday, a certain passage, which says, when the good student hears of the way, he practices it assiduously. When the average student hears about the way, it is here 1 minute, gone the next. When the worst student hears about the way, he laughs out loud. If he did not laugh, it would not be worthy of being the way, right? So it's this sort of wonderful sort of thing that you've got to think in your mind, what is this experience that we're having? Is it the Tao? Is it the way? Are you going to be a student of it? If you're going to be a student of it, figure out what you're going to practice and practice it assiduously, as it said in the translation of the Tao Te Ching that I was reading and memorizing. If you're going to be the average student and it's gone one moment and then it's there the next and then it's gone and then it's there, well, practice assiduously. And if you're going to be the worst student who laughs, well, we're just going to sit there and go, hope you become a good student, because there's so many riches here, right? And it goes on to quote something called the Qin Yin, which says that the way that is bright appears dull. The way that is forward appears to lead backward, right? And there's all these fun things in the Tao Te Ching. That's as far as I got in my memorization of this one passage yesterday, but we'll come back to it. And if if you want to turn the Tao Te Ching into some program for yourself, go ahead. I mean, why not? It doesn't really, as far as I can tell, have a program in it to follow, but it is more of a Zen set of thoughts to think, what is this way that we're talking about? Well, I think that's what we're talking about. The Tao is the same thing as the self in self-inquiry. We're inquiring into consciousness. What is this bizarre world that's appearing of colors and sounds, and who exactly is it appearing to? Is it appearing to this guy who has a card in his wallet, and the wallet says Anthony Metivier, born in February, in Canada? Canada? What is this Canada? The Germans call it Canada. The Chinese call it Canada, right? It's just like, what is this place, right? Well, it's a word. It's a word that appears in consciousness. Later in the Tao Te Ching, it says that, the world, it's like art without a shape, But in consciousness, we impose shapes on the world. But who does it? Who imposed the shape of Canada on the map? Can you find one person who did that? No, you can't, because it's an assemblage of millions of people who are in a thought experiment together that have superimposed through a process that Freud called a very discontented civilization, right? Well, actually, the better translation from the German of civilization and its discontent is civilization and its discomforts. So a very uncomfortable civilization has conspired together to superimpose on each other's conscious minds the idea of the nation, of the country, that words mean something, and yada, yada, yada. But it's really just meat tubes, animals walking around going blah, 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 blah. Hey, has anybody seen that Rush when they were inducted into the Music Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where Alex Lifeson, I think it was Alex Lifeson, the guitar player of Rush, they're accepting the award, and he just goes like this for like 10 minutes, blah, 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 blah. And it gets very, very uncomfortable. But it's a very beautiful Dada-esque Zen moment where you realize that humans in this ceremonial setting are just sitting there with objects, handing them off to one another as if something happened to somebody. And then they're just going blah, blah, blah. I thank you, God. I thank my family. I thank my road manager, etc. Blah, 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 blah. It's just words, right? But we as a collective, as the human experience, the self, our consciousness is shared. You couldn't have a conversation if you didn't share consciousness with me, whoever me is. And we impose upon each other the shape. And then if we buy into it, if we behave, as Michel Foucault says, in Discipline and Punish, well, that we are the subject of power, right? And our suffering comes from how we subject ourselves to power. And in many cases, we don't have any choice, right? But we can unwind the sting by, at some level, learning not to participate in the superimposition on consciousness from others. Is that getting a little bit too deep into the weeds? Well, if you're following that and enjoying it, let us know in the chat. Hit the thumbs up. And I want to say hello to Deanna Myers, who says that she ended up with awesome visuals from the candle meditation. And a moth flew into the flame. Oh, that sounds like back to what we were talking about, very extreme imagery. But you said you emerged from the candle and got larger and ended up looking like a dragonfly and then a fairy. Oh, wow. So this was an imaginary moth. All right. Beautiful. Where moths and rust destroy, I think is a phrase from the Bible somewhere. Wonderful, wonderful. A big dragonfly and then a fairy. Woo! That's great mental imagery. Thank you for that, Deanna. Adolfo says, would you consider mental rehearsal a form of meditation? I do, actually. And Nelson Dulles, thank you, Nelson, very much for writing about the victorious mind, which is in here. Still, we're waiting for the magic moment. This magic moment. He said that he had always thought that memory training was a kind of meditation. And Adolfo says, I always feel euphoric after a few sessions of recall rehearsal. Yes, I've often noticed that myself, that edification. I think that edification is the payoff of spending time with mental focus in the context of a goal. It's like playing a game where you get out and you feel edified. You feel elucidated. You feel enlightened, so to speak, because you've had that stress on, and then you have a release, which goes back to the diffuse.
That's what I was asking about before. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. So did I misunderstand your question before? And then I was just off in fantasy land talking about weird stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was sort of making a point about how it feels to me like when you're in the task positive mode, when you're in the focus mode, it has that meditative, blissful feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I get that. Do you get that after any activities you do?
Yeah. I mean, I think the quality of that blissful feeling will change depending on the activity, but I think broadly you could definitely call memory training meditation. Anything that's focused, that quiets the mind relative to how the mind is before you engage in that activity could be called meditation, really. So
it's quite interesting how when you quiet the mind, it somehow becomes more creative. And you start getting all these great ideas.
Well, I think it's naturally creative.
Right.
The mind is naturally creative, and the mind is naturally quiet. So you get if you want to use the clouds metaphor, it's like the mind is the sky, and the busyness, not necessarily the thoughts, but we could say the self-referential thoughts are the clouds.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the busyness gets superimposed on the stillness, and that also blocks out the creativity. But the creativity is there as well. So,
yeah, I like the sky cloud thing. Deleuze and Guattari in 1,000 Plateaus and other books, Anti-Oedipus and so forth, they talk about territorialization and deterritorialization. So we can think of certain kinds of thoughts and, being angry as a kind of territorialization, like clouds territorialize part of the sky and they become storms, right? But then when the storm is through and the rain has fallen down and the air pressure has dissipated, they deterritorialize and they become the sky again. But it's not as if the clouds are never not the sky. It's not as if the rain is never not the sky, right? But there are these pressures that build up. They territorialize a space. And then for whatever reason, something deterritorializes them. And so that's kind of what we can do on purpose with our thoughts It's what we can do on purpose with our bodies. In some sense, when we go running, we're territorializing, so to speak, that some parts of our bodies operate in particular ways to boost our circulation, blood flow, etc. And then it's going to naturally bring itself back to equilibrium, or something like better than equilibrium, because we've had the workout, we've had the effects of exercise. Same thing with the mind. If you can purposely cause your brain to territorialize for a period of time on a particular thing, it will dissipate, it will go back to a normal state, but it will be improved, it will be better, so to speak, according to whatever metric that you've put in place to determine the difference between bad and worse and so forth. So I hope that is getting us.
I'll just add one thing. When I think it comes to stillness or creativity or any mental state really that you want, well, there's a quote by Viktor Frankl, and he might be quoting someone else. Anthony, you probably know this. So it's happiness can't be pursued, it must ensue. So it basically means, and you can apply that to stillness, you can apply that to creativity, and most any mental state is you just need to practice and put the conditions in place. And then what will arise as a result of those conditions is the mental state you're after. But if you, especially when it comes to stillness, it's kind of the backwards law, as Alan Watts talks about. The more you're trying to get mental stillness, and the more kind of intense energy you're putting into that, the more busy your mind's getting. So it's just about, that's why, everyone talks a lot about focusing on the process and not the goal. And it's really, and that's why, it's because when you focus on the process, the goal comes about more fluidly, more naturally.
Yeah, it'll surprise you. You can chase away what you're trying to have if you push it, right? It's the same thing with writing. Oh, I got to write 1,700 words, or you're just going to stress all this stuff out, right? But if you let go and just relax, anything, just relax. And how do you relax? Well, you practice the things that relax you, right? So that's why I talk so much about progressive muscle relaxation, using your breath to relax yourself. Look, every day that I go and do my meditation stuff, there's always this, not always, but there's often this, do I have to do this again? Well, yes, because that's your ritual, blah, 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 blah. Like it's just, da, 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 da. I don't expect it ever is going to end. There's no point in making it the goal for it to end. Rather, it's just like, well, what are we going to do to show up anyway, despite the preference or the like-dislike monster, etc., etc. We're going to show up by showing up, right? And we're going to have mechanisms in place that make it happen. And then I just sit there, and if I don't feel like doing my stuff, I sit there until that I do, and I just go, well, I got 4 I can recite here. Let's just pick one and then just get started. Or start at the end or whatever, but just go. And then before you know it, you get it done. Same thing with push-ups at the gym or whatever. I'm a little bit out of shape because of my shoulder issue, but I don't feel like doing push-ups. Well, then I go and do pull-ups. And then when I get around to doing the push-ups, but the push-ups get done. And then, as soon as I do one, I'm like, man, I want to do more. Boom. So you just find ways. You got to explore. You got to find ways to get yourself started. All right. Krishna, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Alexander, wonderful to see you. It says, I have that sense of that thing inside that stays the same. It is like a memory bridge from 4 years old to now. Like an internal place I can always go through time. I have memories of going into it. That's wonderful, Alexander. And you remind me that the more I think about this, I feel like I also had this when I was a kid, this feeling that I have now, where it was just like a total connection to space. I remember I used to, at the babysitters, lay on the couch. We were picked up early in the morning, or taken from home early in the morning by my mom, who was a shift nurse, and we were taken to the babysitters, and we'd be at the babysitters like 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, and I couldn't get back to sleep. I was horrified of the breakfast to come because the food always made me really sick at the babysitters. But I would lay there on the couch and I would just imagine like I was Superman flying through space, and I would see all these stars, and I'd just be totally connected with space and going into infinity and just holding on to that feeling for hours. And I would take it with me into school and just be constantly in this kind of flight mode. And then I remembered that very strongly when, after you sent me on this adventure and I started doing all this self-inquiry stuff and all the different meditation practices that accelerated everything. I was like, wow, this is like that feeling when I was a kid, just totally switched on, endlessly entertained in my own mind. I wasn't bored. I was just excited for hours, just laying on this couch. And then I'd be walking to school. It was just, constant fantasy, totally being connected with whatever, just in the vast space of the mind. So you ever have anything like that when you were a kid?
No.
No? Oh man, I used to play in my mind for hours. Like I would read, we mentioned Willy Wonka today, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I would read a book like that, and I would replay the book in my mind for hours, almost like I now play Sanskrit in my mind for a long time every day. I just used to love that. I remember when it must have been grade 6, maybe grade 5. Yeah, it was even earlier, maybe 4, something like that. I could look at the calendar. RoboCop came out. We recorded the audio of RoboCop and put it on cassettes. I think it had to be on 3 cassettes or something, and would listen to it in the Walkman on the walk to school and replay RoboCop in my mind. I got so good at it, I could replay RoboCop just in my mind. It was unbelievable. And I used to spend hours in RoboCop land, and I don't think it's much different now that I play around in just this present moment land.
There's a book called Neurobiology of the Gods. I can't remember who wrote it, but he talks about sacred time, which is, as opposed to normal psychological time, you've got sacred time, which is kind of like a no time place, which is why they often start fairy tales with once upon a time in a land far, far away.
Right.
It's because they're giving you this sense of like this kind of mysticism or wide open space and time. It's the same place you go when you dream. And I think when you kind of can relax the logical, rational thinking mind, what comes up naturally is something that's more akin to the place you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I mean, there's so much to be done in narrative studies that could be, if it isn't already, mapped onto studies of consciousness and so forth. I did some stuff that relates to that a lot in my film studies career. All right. So Nick says, "Come on, open it. You want to go cycling?" Krishna says, "Can you start some practice sessions for better memory?" Yeah, well, there's many of them all over this YouTube channel, and of course on the exercises page of the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. And yeah, so I'm not sure what you mean by practice sessions, but let me know more what you think there. And let's catch up with some of these questions later and open this up here. Right. So did we decide we're doing hardcover first? Is that right?
Should we get a vote?
Yeah.
Do you want to vote?
Do you want to vote?
Who wants to vote? Hardcover or paperback first? Let's catch up with 1 or 2 more questions while we see if we can get the fingers typing. And if you're just joining us, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Get subscribed if you're here new. If you're not subscribed already, let us know in the chat. What do you want to see first, the paperback or the hardcover? I'm assuming that that's what's in these boxes, actually. People send me books all the time. Maybe it's something else. Austin is here. Good to see you. It's been a while. I know I haven't been live streaming for a while, guys. And I apologize for that. I've had some problems with my mouth and needed to take a bit of a break, but hopefully we can do some live streaming soon. By the way, I keep forgetting to do the marketing shtick. It's so much fun to market. I absolutely love it. But if you don't have this book and you haven't ordered it yet, order it, send in the receipt, and I am only able to invite people to the workshop in June, where we're going to set up our goals. We're going to go through some of the nitty-gritty of the memory techniques and do some hardcore training. It was Krishna who was asking about doing some sessions. Send in your receipt. You get some extra goodies. You get a study course that helps you with this book called How to Stop Thinking. And I just need to have that, and we'll get you set up, and you'll be invited to a special private June workshop. All right. So looks like hardcover wins. What do you guys think?
Yeah, hardcover it is.
All right. So here we go. Opening the hardcover. I'm assuming that this is what this is, but can we get this visible here on the screen? Sorry.
Hold it up, yeah.
Oh! I have almost no practice with unboxing videos. This is not quite the right setup. Oh, that's a very wine dark sea color. Somebody had... Ooh. Oh, that's how that looks. Okay. Here we go. Are we ready? That's a big book. Holy cow. You could do some serious Look at that. That's like a brick.
How good does that cover look?
Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now, I believe this hardcover is color. Should be. Yeah, that looks like color to me. Yeah. So we have color images inside of the hardcover.
Wow.
So if you can't remember Proverbs 18:13 after that, I don't know what else could do it for you. But yeah, oh, that looks nice. So that's a beautiful image there. And yeah, lots of photos, lots of illustrations, lots of diagrams and so forth. And yeah, it looks pretty good for a hardcover. There you go.
That to me?
Yeah.
That looks incredible.
Yeah, it looks really, really good.
Great print.
It's like a university textbook. I didn't think it was going to look that good, actually. I was kind of concerned.
Cool picture.
Braden is here. Wow, Braden is a great, great memory athlete, thinker about memory techniques. If you haven't heard Braden's episode on the Magnetic Brain Method podcast, definitely check that out. Wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful. Oh, wow. And Braden and I come from very similar territory in Western Canada. So we still have the paperback to look at. So let's just get it done with. I like these sounds. Wow, Restream says we've received 100 messages today. Wow, see, they're marketing to me. They're reminding me that we too can get a reward. Oh, that's quite big for a paperback. But that's the paperback.
That looks really good too.
Let's see here. So now the pictures are in black and white. The price was going to be through the roof to have color pictures in the paperback, although it's possible. But and you know, we've got, it's not just about my memory palaces. We've got special memory palaces from Magnetic Memory Method students who have done really well. Hey, look, William, you're in here.
Well, I didn't know you had a photo of that.
That's right. So there it is. That's the paperback.
Cool.
Yeah, well, and that's the hardcover. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for sharing the process. This has been a long book to put together. And for those of you here on the live stream, I don't know if some of you would have been here when we actually talked about this the first time. And I was mind mapping out the stuff that needed to be in this book. And so this is a community experience. And some people were on a live stream where we went through the outline and everything and really made sure that it covered all the bases possible. And it's been a long time coming. And then, of course, we had a certain global meltdown while I was trying to put it together, and that delayed things. It made things... See, that looks so much better in color.
Wow, yeah.
Look at how amazing that looks in color. Yeah, I think color is the better choice. But I really appreciate everybody who's been patient with... a lot of people have asked, when's the book coming out? When's the book coming out? And again, when you have the book, there's a link that will help you go through this whole map. The map's not showing up great on the live stream, but we couldn't have every single photograph in there. There's also an index in the back. People often ask me, would I recommend certain books? There's a huge, well, not that huge, but there's a works cited so you can follow all the books, footnotes and whatnot. But, you know, at the end of the day, I really want to thank you both. Thanks you, Ben, for setting me on the adventure that led to this by recommending a book. And if there's one thing you can do to people or for people is be a reader yourself so that you have books to recommend. One of the things that's very challenging that I talk about in The Victorious Mind, and I was asked about it today, is, you know, how did you manage to change your life around? How did you manage to go from being suicidal, depressed, drinking all the time to drown your sorrows, to having these life tools? And part of the problem is that I was just lucky. Now, we know that there's actually a science to luck. In The Luck Factor, Richard Weissman teaches you about luck, how to create luck. And I worked really hard on his exercises in the luck factor. If you don't know Richard Weissman, he is a bona fide scientist. It's not woo-woo or anything like that. In fact, Darren Brown, who's a very good skeptic and practitioner of the mental arts of memory and other mental arts, he has replicated one of Richard Weissman's science experiments on his program. And he shows just how your mindset is involved in causing you to be lucky or not, right? So you may have seen that episode where I think it's the town butcher who they go out of their way to make him discover free money, to win contests and all this sort of stuff. And he just can't see it. Like his mindset is so negative. He even, he sort of finds that he's won this thing and he just says, it must be a fraud. Must be, it must be some sort of people, criminals or whatever, right? And he just completely discounts the fact that he could have got £100 or something like this. And it's just a great lesson in how we're ignoring how lucky we are all the time because we just have the negative mindset. So back to thank you to Ben. He reads books. He was able to recommend just the right book at the right moment that led to this massive adventure leading to this book, which is now going to, it's been #1 on Amazon the last couple of days in New Age meditation. We saw that it, for a couple hours, knocked Dave Rubin out of #1 for self-help, which is hilarious because his book is called Don't Burn This Book. So I tweeted him and I said, nice to stand victorious beside Dave Rubin. Don't burn this book either. Please don't burn my book either. Anyway, I thank you for that. Thank you for being prepared to say and recommend the right book at the right time. That really is a lesson for all of us. Because Nietzsche says, and I mentioned this in here, and it's really, really important that you understand this. His highest philosophical moment that will help you the most, I believe. I wrote about it in my dissertation on friendship. I did my whole dissertation on friendship because of this such important principle. In German, if I can remember the German here, du kannst für dein Freund nicht schön genug putzen, du sollst ein Pfeil und eine Sehnsucht nach der Übermensch sein. You can never prepare yourself enough for your friend. You should be an arrow and a longing for the Superman or the Overman. Now, Overman is nuanced here. Basically, what he's saying is you should prepare yourself to be the best possible friend for everybody you meet. Stranger, best friend for 1,000 years, whatever. Your work in life is to prepare yourself to be the best possible contributor to the betterment of others, knowing that you can never be good enough, right? But by making the attempt, you've done more than enough, right? And the whole thing, we can get into the nuance of why is it an arrow and what is the Übermensch and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is, the whole point to understand about Nietzsche is he looks at time in a particular way. Time is something that repeats. The same trends come again and again and again. And you should, even if that isn't true, live your life in such a way that you live in such a way that you would love to be cursed to live the same day over and over and over again. So if you were suddenly Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, you were cursed to live that day over and over and over again, you should, like Bill Murray, refine the process so that you live the best possible day, so you would enjoy being cursed to live it out eternally, right? Because here's Nietzsche's joke. You are cursed to live the same day over and over again for as long as you're alive, right? And part of what is built into life, and you and I were talking about this the other day, part of what is built into life is dissatisfaction with everything. It is the evolutionary imperative to be dissatisfied. It's part of what we've talked about from the beginning of today, is that as long as you have a brain, your brain is going to have some thoughts. It's going to experience dissatisfaction because we are evolutionarily propelled to have goals. And if we don't have goals, then we hurt even more because not having goals hurts. And when we have goals, we're bound to miss the mark some of the time. And it's going to hurt. It just is, right? But if you at least show up to be the best at your game, you have that mindset that you're doing it for others, not yourself, because you don't have one. There is no self. There's just you, and there's you, and there's you, all of you, right? And we get together. We make it happen, right? Alan Watts said, if you're not dancing every day with joy, you haven't lived yet, right? You haven't understood yet. You haven't switched on yet. How do you do that? You show up and you help others every day, because you don't have any self without them, right? So, thank you for being the best possible friend.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
Well, very welcome. And thank you, William. He not only did he photograph this entire memory palace from top to bottom, but he actually made a wonderful graphic, and he edited all those photos, of course, too. And he embedded a little Easter egg inside of there. I mean, he knows I like Easter eggs, I guess. But there's every bit of care into making amazing photographs for this. And it took a lot of time, took a lot of attention, and I'm very, very grateful. And I'm also just grateful for your friendship.
Well, I'm grateful for yours.
It's
and Ben's as well, because I've received the secondhand teachings.
That's right. And all teachings should be secondhand for sure. I mean, what other hand would they be?
I guess.
That is what teaching is, right? And you learn by teaching, you learn by sharing, you learn by passing it forward. All right, Justin says, I'm going to get the book. Excellent, Justin. Thank you for getting that. Asian Art of Living is here. Hello. Adolfo says, so we receive the extra goodies when we buy it directly from Amazon. I'm 3 seconds from clicking the buy button on the hard copy on Amazon. Excellent. Yes, there is a special link embedded in the book that gets you some extra goodies, but you get even more extra goodies when you send the receipt, and I will invite you to the June workshop. You guys are invited, of course, also if you want. It'll be entirely online, but if you want to come to visit in Brisbane, well, I guess we could arrange something, but it'll be a bit difficult, so best to do online. And yeah, I'm hoping to really work this book into the system, into the algorithms. It was great to get it in some categories on #1 on Amazon, but that's not the time to rest. That's the time to get started. And thank you to everybody who's already gotten it. You know, let me know. I'd love if some of you would be so kind as to do that stuff that people do, pictures of yourself with the book if you get the physical one on Amazon. Leave reviews on Amazon. That really helps. I'm an independent author. All of these things that I do is with a very small, tight team. It's not a corporation. I'm not against corporations, but I'm not one. And that causes me to operate in ways that are rather limited. And I don't cut corners. I play the memory tradition the way that it is, at least as I see it. I always love to learn more. I treat it as not knowing what I don't know, which is part of the project, to constantly expand. I've invited everybody I can possibly invite onto the Magnetic Memory Method podcast to treat this like a university. And there are new Easter eggs in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass that show you just what kind of support I have from the memory community, because they've spent their time to give you Easter eggs inside of there. People who know these techniques, they know this so well. They have done things that are unbelievable with their minds, and they took their time to share that with you. We've distributed this now throughout the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. I was so honored to have Braden, for example, who's here now. I'm honored to have him here now, and he was so kind as to write some words about this book on the page that, you know, books need to have wherever it is, all the reviews and stuff like that. Can't seem to find it. Oh, it's on the page. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So Braden Adams said some wonderful things here. John Graham, 2018 USA Memory Champion, says, I consider yours truly, Anthony Metivier, a personal mentor. You know, I'm not going to read all of these things, but if you need if you need all of this convincing from quotes and stuff like that, there's pages of them in here, and I'm just deeply honored. But what you should see here is not some self-evaluation or me trumpeting my own horn. Although my dissertation supervisor, I saw him do this amazing display of listing all of his accomplishments, and he was the most sought after person to have as your dissertation supervisor. And he said, if you're not going to trumpet your own horn, how are you going to expect anybody else ever will? Right? So I've always kept that in mind. And he's, you know, a great and accomplished scholar himself, Jamie Scott. I was very honored to work with him. But nonetheless, I'll leave it for you to go and read these yourself if you need that for persuasion. But I'm so honored Braden is here, and how he described the experience of reading it. I'd love for you to check that out. Lynn Kelly wrote a review. Nelson Dellis, Jonathan Levy, of course. So many wonderful people. Seth Panok, who's, is the co-founder of PositivePsychology.com. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm very deeply honored for all the people who have gotten behind this product. And it's not a product, it's a university. And I treat it with the ideals of the university that I learned, which is to have as many voices in there, sharing their ideas, sharing their experience. And the more that you guys support it and make it happen, the more people I can invite on, the more I can speak to. John Michael Greer, he's going to be on the show soon. I've already interviewed him. And, it can be very hard to understand what Bruno was talking about on the Shadows of the Ideas. But John showed up and he gave his time to talk deeper about On the Shadows of the Ideas. We want to keep this going. I'd love to be doing this for 20, 30 years. And all we need is to continue making you all happy enough to support it. So I'm really, really grateful that I get to do this work, that I get to continue to explore it. By the way, in your care package, when you download it from The Victorious Mind using the link inside, you get the chapter from my next book, which is called Smarter. And SMARTER, of course, is an acronym. It means serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality, right? And it's a whole new book. Already the first chapter is there. The audio book is there, or the audio chapter of the first chapter and the PDF, etc. And I don't know when exactly it's going to come out, but we're already working on it. The book after that is already underway. I have so many ideas for so many books, and I thank you. I'm grateful to be able to do this work. And just as an independent, I don't have words for what it means to be able to do this. So I thank you all, and thank you for making it possible. And we've been able to create quite a mise en scène here, quite a background in which to do it. And everything in life is unstable. It's subject to change. We don't know how long we get to stay here. It's going to be a pain in the butt if we have to move, but one day we will, right? And we don't know where to go after we go, but this is life, and this is what the Victorious Mind is about, is when you don't get to know the future, how do you prepare your memory to handle the stress of not knowing? Nobody gets to know. All the richest people in the world right now, they're thinking about where they're going to buy their bunkers. As if that is going to save them from whatever is yet to come. The reality is what's going to save you from what is yet to come. Knock on wood that you don't have to, but it's going to be the quality of your memory. It's going to be the quality of how you've helped others, created a network of individuals who know and love you because you didn't put yourself first, but rather you learned to integrate and assemble with everybody around you to be the best possible friend you could be to all of them. That's going to take some practice. It's going to take some training, and there is no end point. There's nowhere to go because you can never prepare yourself enough to be the best possible friend. But you can be like the arrow that flies toward that ever-receding target, and you can learn to knock the arrow on the bow with great grace and know how to start again if you fall. Just grab another arrow and knock it on the bow and grab another arrow. And that's the Zen of things. The starting point is the goal. But you can get better and better at starting, which is the reps that you talked about. So, thank you, everybody. I'm really, really excited. Adolfo got the hardcover. I really appreciate it. And I thank everybody who's left reviews already. And again, it's a great honor. We got another video coming out on the channel soon. So if you're here and you're not subscribed, get subscribed. Make sure you hit the bell notification so that you get notified. And hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. If you're watching the replay, please say hello in the discussion below. Anything you guys want to add before we go?
No, not particularly. I was thinking maybe we'll hop on another one next week or two, and I've got some things I'd like to discuss about meditation, memory, stuff like that.
Absolutely. This is Ben Fischel from ProjectMonkeyMind.com, and go over to ProjectMonkeyMind.com. If you forget that, it's listed here in the Victorious Mind. Thank you for William. Thank you to William. Anything you want to say before we rock off?
I'm not sure there is. There's a lot of topics we raised today that I'd love to chat to you both more about. So
I would love to have a regular chat just about the memory meditation philosophy nexus, so to speak. Is that the right word? Assemblage? Matrix?
yeah.
But you're williamgordonphotography.com.au?
That's right.
Okay, so if you need photography, and I can't think of a better person, go and visit williamgordonphotography.com.au and take care of yourselves out there. Meditate, use memory techniques as you meditate, and enjoy the process. Enjoy the ride. You're the only one who can. Until we have a chance to speak again, thank you again for being here. Come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. Get the Victorious Mind. Let me know that you got it with your receipt. I will set you up with some free stuff, and you will get that exclusive invitation to the June workshop, and we will be there. And until then, keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.